Back to one of our top stories, which is the EFF calling for reforms at National Treasury. It comes after the Western Cape High Court yesterday set aside Parliament's adoption of the fiscal framework and halted the VAT increase. Political analyst Professor Dirk Kotzé joins us now for more. Professor, good to speak to you as always. EFF leader Julius Malema now calling for the resignation of Finance Minister. Is he justified in making this call, do you think?
Well, I think this is coming quite some way now already. The DA did the same at some point. I think they keep the Minister of Finance responsible for what has happened since the postponement of the first budget speech that was not delivered. And now all the developments since then, both in Parliament as well as now in the courts. So I think from a point of view of, if you ask the question, who takes ultimate responsibility for the budget and the budgetary process and the preparations for it, then indeed it is the minister.
So maybe let's unpack firstly, Professor, what it is that the minister didn't do right in ending up in this debacle. Because obviously if the Western Cape High Court has stopped the VAT increase, and the minister now has to go back to Parliament and table potentially another budget, it suggests that there were areas where he may not have done the best he could.
Well, I think to start with, that right in the beginning, the fact that the original budget speech was postponed was clearly because there was not sufficient consultation between the different members of the Government of National Unity. And to a large extent, they actually conceded that. Then thereafter, it was when they went back in order to prepare an alternative for the VAT increases. It seems like in the end, they did not want to move away from the principle of increasing VAT, as we know, but rather just to reduce it. And I think in that sense, they maybe misread the general climate in the country, the widespread resistance against it. And that VAT as an issue should not have appeared at all in this budget. I think this is the message coming from the public in general. Then at the same time, the way in which it has been presented to the parliamentary committees, I think, again, that is something where they try to, as well as I would say the decision that was made by the Committee on Finance, which was a very strange type of decision, that they approved it but also didn't approve it because they recommended that it should be changed. I think that was one of the real causes or core issues, core problems that arose out of this whole process. And it set up a parliament really to take a decision which has now been proven to be beyond the legislation and regarded as illegal.
So this whole process has been described in some quarters as rather messy, right? Now, does this expose the ANC and their position in the GNU?
Well, I won't reduce it to that. I think what we are going to say is for each other, and I think this is what many of the parties are saying now also, is that we were not, they as the parties were not really prepared to, or did not, there wasn't an agreed procedure of how to prepare for this budget. No, we can go take it back to the time immediately after the election when there was almost no time in order to deal with issues like this, procedural matters about decision-making within the Government of National Unity. They did use only the absolute minimum were included in the statement of intent. And I think this is what we have seen now with the budget, but also previously with the Bella Act and the Expropriation Act and the National Health Insurance and other matters, is that the Government of National Unity is actually not really prepared and geared in order to take decisions as a coalition government is supposed to do it. And they have now seen the negative results of that, specifically with the budget. And I think this is the major lesson that they hopefully have learned now, is that they will have to go back to the drawing board in terms of the internal processes, as well as understanding what is the contribution that the different political parties can make and should make in the decision-making process. Because I think the ANC always regarded themselves as the majority party within the government of national unity. And then they have the final say. Although in the statement of intent, they talk about sufficient consensus of 60%, that hasn't been used yet as a mechanism. But it hasn't been applied also really, the real decision-making process. So the bottom line is, I think where the ANC to a large extent looked at the government of national unity as a government, a cooperative government, and not that of a power-sharing government, that they start to understand now there is an element, a very prominent element of power-sharing that must be included in this.
Now, the EFF suggests that Parliament, not the Finance Minister, should have final say over tax changes like VAT adjustments. Would greater parliamentary control strengthen or weaken South Africa's fiscal management, in your view, Professor?
Well, it's an absolute constitutional principle. It's non-negotiable. You know, the fact that there's even a debate about it, I can't understand that happens. The absolute principle of democracy, a democratic system, is that the executive cannot take decisions, especially about the budget. It must be done in Parliament. Go back to what is referred to as the Boston Tea Party in the US. It's exactly was about that. That the people, the population refused the fact that they were not directly involved in decision-making about the budget. And that still applies up to now.
Now, there are several parties that are claiming victory over this VAT reversal, the EFF included. Where does this leave the EFF?
Well, I think in this particular case, the EFF possibly played it right. If we look at the opinion polls, their public support in terms of the opinion polls, yes, there's its own faults and shortcomings, but shows that they increased their support. All the parties who opposed the increase of VAT, their public support also increased, and those parties who were seen as in support of VAT, their public support decreased. So I think in that sense, the DA and the EFF or the EFF made the right choice from that particular point of view.
Now, we're well aware that the EFF lost traction in that ill-fated election last year. Are they likely to take advantage of their current position and obviously this glory that they're enjoying at the moment?
Well, as I've just now indicated, they did receive some support for this. I don't think it will be long-lasting, that it will be a long-term trend. It was, in a sense, a moment now, and it applies to, I think, most of the parties. And this trend, it's not something that we can use, for example, to look at next year's local government election. But for the moment now, it certainly looked at as if the EFF had a moment of increase. But as I said, I think it's not going to be the general trend in the next number of months.
And finally, Professor, in your view, is a VAT reversal a genuine victory for constitutional democracy?
Well, what is the victory is the process that was followed. The content, the issue is in a sense, it's important, but it's not about the issue per se of VAT or tax in particular. It is about the way in which the government of national unity first functioned, how it then went to Parliament, and how it was shown that the process that was followed in Parliament wasn't in accordance with the law. So the fact that they've accepted that, and that is also an important part of this process, and if taking it back to the Treasury and then back to Parliament, I think it looks messy, but it's the best way of doing it now.
Professor Dirk Kotzé, always great speaking to you and affirming that the processes that have taken place in the VAT reversal are indeed sound processes.